in this lesson, we are going to finish our animation. So to do that, we're finished last lesson with identifying the propeller, that this is where I want it to come into our animation. And so I'm going to hit that. It's going to hit at 144. So, and I know it's going to be animating in Z, so I'm going to go ahead and key translate Z at 144. And I'll back it out probably to, let's go to 132. It's about a half second. And I will push this off screen like so. And of course, we're going to have to animate our visibility. So we'll go to visibility, key selected, and scooch that over one and turn it off. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I want this not only to come into scene and lock in, but I also want it to be rotating. So I'm going to rotate this in Z, okay? And so I'm going to go ahead and begin my animation. Here is as good as any, so I'll key it. And then I'm going to go to frame 240, and I'm going to type in probably 180. And now what I should see is this should be rotating. I want to make sure it's rotating in the right direction. Yeah, that looks about right. And then it's going to stop at 180. But I'll tell you the truth, I would prefer it to stop somewhere a little more interesting, maybe right in there. All right, so it should come to a rest right here. So it's going to be spinning pretty good, and that's fine. If we find it is too distracting, we can always change that. All right, so at 144, the propeller comes in. Now, what I'm ready to do is I'm ready to drop all of these, except, of course, for the rudder, drop these down onto my, onto the landing gear. So what I'm going to do now is at 144, I'm going to go ahead and start this. I'm going to go to Cockpit, Body Geo, Prop Geo, and both wings, and I'm going to key them. I'm going to key Translate Y right here, and then at 168, I'm going to go ahead and drop them down to 0. So now they're in the right place. So now they're just going to drop down. Now I'm ready for I'm going to let the rudder, I'm going to let the elevator go first. I think the elevator is I'm going to have the elevator come into the picture at 204 and have it lock in. Actually, no, I'm going to have the elevator come into the picture at 192. The reason for that is I'm going to run out of time if I don't. So I'll lock that in. It's going in Z, so I'm going to key selected, and we will roll it back. No, if I run out, that's fine. I'm actually not going to run out of time. I'll be okay. 204. We'll go to 204. We'll run it back to 192. Pull this off screen like so, and key visibility. Back it out one and turn it off. So that's coming in there. And I think I'll also have the rudder come in as well. Because I'm not going to get I'm not going to get another one. I can move things around if I need to. So this finishes at 204. I'm going to have this come in at 202, about 210. So we'll key translate and pull this out all the way out like so, and key our visibility. Okay. So now we've got that coming in, and then that comes in. Yeah, and we can see that insert into the slots pretty well. And then it will come down and finish the animation. All right, so now what we're going to do, we've got all of everything's off stage. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and run a play blast of this to see what this looks like. So I'm going to right click in my window here and choose play blast. And they've made a few changes. I'm going to go ahead and display size from render settings. I'm going to give it a scale of 1. And I'll go ahead and save to file, and we can call that 31 begin. And I'm just going to press Play Blast, and it will run through. And the Play Blast actually renders pretty quick. The Play Blast is going to be really the final arbiter of the speed of this animation. So I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to see everything coming in. And that looks pretty good. The Play Blast really is the final arbiter of how fast the animation is going to go, and so it should always be what you want. And if you don't want to judge it from playing back your viewport, okay, because your viewport has many different. It changes size, it changes everything. So your real first arbiter, of course, your final arbiter is when it's rendered, because that's going to change things too. But for what we're doing here, I think we've got a perfect. I think that's pretty good. Not perfect, but it's good enough. We'll go with this. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set up my final render settings, and this is a little trickier because what we're going to want to do is I'm going to want to bring up my render settings, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my name, number, and extension. That's going to give me my extension, and I'm going to set my end frame to 240. Now, there are many ways we can script render. We can do all kinds of stuff, and we'll do that, and that's cool. But for right now, we're just going to use the render settings for this. And I like to change. I'm going to change this. If disk space matters to you, use PNGs or JPEGs. If they don't, I like to use TIFF. And of course, if you can, you want to use OpenEXR, you can. There's plenty of good render. There's good render tutorials on using that. I'm going to use, you can also use MyIFS if you want, but I like to use TIFFs. Now these will render, if you look, they'll render into your images folder. It's hard, it doesn't go all the way through, but that's where it will go. And it's going to give you the beginning number and the ending number. So I'm going to start my frame at 0. And that's what it's going to look like. So right now it'd be 32 begin, or I can call this wooden plane, and it will give me wooden plane. Okay, so I'm going to go to quality. Now's the time to kick up our render quality to 1. Final gathering, we're squared away. And scenes, I'm not going to go into things like motion blur, although you can. And actually, I believe we can go with no deformation on this and see what it will look like. And what we're going to do next, once we do that though, to get a sense of how we're going to animate or how this is going to look, it's going to be important to render several frames. I like to render at least 3. And so I'm going to go here and I'll pick a representative frame and I'll go to my render view. Okay. And I'm going to render a snapshot of my render cam. And I'm going to render I want to render 3 frames throughout my animation, and then basically multiply them together and multiply them by the total number, multiply the render times, get an average render time and multiply it by the total number of frames. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pause this. Oh, I forgot one important point. We want to go in and we want to change our size to HD 720. That's going to matter for our final render. Now you can go 1080 if you want, but 720 seems to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this. I'm going to do my renders and show you what exactly it is I'm talking about. And we're back. So after pausing this, I basically picked 3 sort of at random. I basically went from 43, 83, and 146. And you can see that if you take these 3, this was render time was almost 6 minutes. This was 4.5, and this was 3 minutes. But that's, things were getting more complex as things went along. Basically, it averages out roughly to about 4.5 minutes per frame. And that's because we've got, motion blur and high quality settings. You could probably tweak that a little bit by changing the quality a little bit if you so choose. But if you're going to be just letting this go, render overnight, it's basically going to take about 18 hours to render. And so that is how, we would basically render this and set it up and have it be ready for to put into a movie. And so that's pretty much finishes the Maya section. In the next movie or two, I'm planning on, or the next lesson or two, I'm planning on setting this up for 3D printing and present some ideas for that. but that will be in the next movie.